If you're over 60 and you wake up every morning feeling like your joints have turned to concrete overnight, I need you to pay very close attention to what I'm about to share with you. Because what you do, or more importantly, what you forget to do in the final hour before sleep, could be the hidden reason your joint stiffness keeps getting worse, no matter how many supplements you take or how carefully you eat. I'm Dr. Sophia Reynolds, and I've spent over 2 decades as a rheumatologist helping patients understand the complex relationship between their daily habits and their joint health. And I can tell you from thousands of consultations that the nighttime routine is perhaps the most overlooked factor in managing joint stiffness, especially for those of us in our 60s, 70s, and beyond. Before we dive into this crucial information, if you haven't subscribed to this channel yet, I recommend hitting that subscribe button and turning on notifications so you never miss another health tip created especially for you. And if you find this video helpful, please leave your suggestions and questions in the comments below. I read every single one, and it helps me create more content to help people just like you. Now, let me tell you about Margaret. Mrs. Margaret Collins, 72 years old, a retired librarian from Portland, Oregon. Margaret came to see me after 3 years of progressively worsening morning stiffness. She told me, "Dr. Reynolds, I feel like I've aged 20 years overnight. Every single morning it takes me nearly an hour just to feel human again. My fingers won't cooperate. My knees feel like they're filled with sand, and my husband has to help me out of bed most days." What struck me about Margaret's case wasn't the severity of her symptoms. It was that she was doing almost everything right during the day. She exercised regularly, ate well, stayed hydrated, and took her supplements. But when I asked her about her nighttime routine, particularly the hour before bed, she looked at me confused. "I just watch television until I feel sleepy, then I go to bed," she said. "What does that have to do with my joints?" "Everything, Margaret, absolutely everything. You see, your body goes through remarkable processes while you sleep. This is when your joints receive the majority of their repair signals, when inflammation markers can either calm down or intensify, and when the synovial fluid that cushions your joints gets replenished. What you do before this critical window determines whether your body enters a state of healing or a state of increased inflammation. The first thing many people over 60 forget before sleep is proper hydration timing. Now, I know what you're thinking. You've heard you shouldn't drink too much water before bed to avoid nighttime bathroom trips. And that's partially true. But here's what most people don't understand. There's a significant difference between flooding your system with water right before you close your eyes and strategic hydration 2 to 3 hours before bedtime. Mr. Robert Chen, 68, a former construction supervisor from Sacramento, California, learned this lesson the hard way. Robert had severe stiffness in his hands and shoulders that was affecting his ability to enjoy his retirement hobby of woodworking. "I stopped drinking anything after dinner because I was tired of getting up 3 times a night," he told me. But I didn't realize I was essentially dehydrating my joints for 8 hours straight. When we examined Robert's habits more closely, we discovered he was having his last drink at around 6 in the evening, then going to bed at 11. That's 5 hours without any hydration, followed by 7 to 8 hours of sleep. His joints were essentially going through a 12 to 13-hour drought every single day. The synovial fluid in your joints, that precious lubricating substance that allows smooth movement, is primarily composed of water. When you're dehydrated, even mildly, this fluid becomes thicker and less effective. Imagine trying to lubricate a squeaky door hinge with honey instead of oil. That's essentially what happens to your joints when they don't have adequate hydration. The solution isn't complicated, but it requires intentionality. Having a moderate amount of water, about 8 ounces, roughly 2 hours before your intended bedtime, gives your body time to distribute that hydration to your tissues while also giving you time to empty your bladder before sleep. Robert started implementing this simple change, and within 3 weeks, he noticed a meaningful improvement in his morning mobility. If you're still watching and finding this information helpful, drop a comment below to let me know you're with me. Your engagement helps this video reach more people who need this information. But if that surprised you, Wait until you hear about the second forgotten habit that could be sabotaging your joints every single night. Gentle movement before bed. And I'm not talking about exercise. In fact, vigorous exercise close to bedtime can actually increase inflammation and interfere with sleep quality. What I'm referring to is something much more subtle and profoundly more important for joint health. Mrs. Dorothy Williams, 75, a retired school teacher from Nashville, Tennessee, spent her evenings in a recliner watching her favorite shows. "I thought I was being good to my body by resting," she explained during our first consultation. "My joints hurt, so I figured the less I moved, the better." This is one of the most common misconceptions I encounter, and it's causing tremendous harm to people's joint health. When you remain completely sedentary in the hours before sleep, your joints begin to stiffen in whatever position you're holding them. The synovial fluid pools and doesn't circulate properly. The surrounding muscles tighten and create additional pressure on the joint structures. Dorothy's evening routine consisted of approximately 4 hours of sitting, then going directly to bed. Her joints had essentially been immobile for 12 hours by the time she woke up. No wonder she felt like the Tin Man from The Wizard of Oz every morning. What changed everything for Dorothy was implementing what I call bedtime joint preparation. About 30 to 45 minutes before sleep, she began doing very gentle range of motion movements. Not stretching to the point of discomfort. Not exercise that raises your heart rate. Simply moving each major joint through its comfortable range of motion 5 to 10 times. She would slowly circle her ankles while sitting on the edge of her bed. She would gently open and close her hands. She would carefully rotate her shoulders and turn her neck from side to side. The entire routine took less than 10 minutes, but the impact was remarkable. "It felt strange at first," Dorothy told me at her follow-up appointment. "I kept thinking I should be doing something more intense. But after about 2 weeks, I started waking up feeling noticeably different. Not perfect, but so much better than before." The science behind this is quite straightforward. These gentle movements stimulate the production of synovial fluid and help distribute it evenly throughout the joint capsule. They also signal to your body that these joints will be needed upon waking, priming them for the morning hours. Think of it as sending a gentle reminder to your joints that they'll be called into action soon. Now, here's where things get really interesting, and this is something that even many healthcare providers don't emphasize enough. The position you sleep in and how you prepare for that position matters enormously for joint health. Mr. Harold Patterson, 69, a retired accountant from Chicago, Illinois, came to see me with severe hip and lower back stiffness that had progressively worsened over 5 years. He'd seen multiple specialists, tried various treatments, but nothing seemed to provide lasting relief. When I asked Harold about his sleep position, he said he'd always been a side sleeper. Nothing unusual there. But when I asked him to describe exactly how he positioned himself, the problem became immediately apparent. "I just kind of curl up," he said. Knees pulled up toward my chest, arms crossed, head bent forward. Harold was spending 7 to 8 hours every night in the fetal position, and his joints were adapting to this compressed state. The hip joints, when held in a tightly flexed position for hours, begin to experience changes in the surrounding soft tissues. The muscles on the front of the hip shorten and tighten. The joint capsule adapts to this compressed position. When Harold would wake up and try to straighten his body, everything resisted. His joints had essentially been trained to stay curled up. What Harold forgot to do before sleep was to prepare his body for a more joint-friendly position. This means taking a few minutes to consciously position yourself in a way that keeps your joints in a more neutral alignment. For side sleepers like Harold, this often means placing a pillow between the knees to keep the hips more aligned, using a pillow that keeps the neck in a neutral position rather than bent forward, and consciously relaxing the arms rather than crossing them tightly. Harold also began spending just 5 minutes before getting into bed, standing tall and gently extending his spine backward, opening up the front of his hips with a very gentle lunge position and letting his arms hang loosely at his sides. This counteracted the compressed position he would assume during sleep and gave his joints a fighting chance. I never realized, Harold told me months later, that I was essentially telling my body to stay curled up like a shrimp for decades. No wonder I couldn't straighten out in the morning. But perhaps the most overlooked factor in nighttime joint health is one that might surprise you: temperature management. Mrs. Patricia Gonzalez, 71, a retired nurse from Phoenix, Arizona, had lived through countless hot summers and had become accustomed to keeping her bedroom quite cool at night. Air conditioning running, ceiling fan on, lightweight sheets only. She thought she was optimizing her sleep environment for better rest. What Patricia didn't realize was that her joints were suffering in the cold. "I always kept the room around 65 degrees, she told me. "I read somewhere that cold rooms help you sleep better, but I was waking up so stiff I could barely move." Here's what happens when your joints get cold during sleep. The synovial fluid becomes more viscous, less able to lubricate effectively. The muscles surrounding the joints contract in response to the cold, creating tension and compression. Blood flow to the extremities decreases as your body prioritizes keeping your core organs warm. Your fingers, toes, knees, and shoulders, the joints that often give us the most trouble, are left without adequate circulation for hours. The solution isn't to sleep in a sauna. Temperature extremes in either direction can interfere with sleep quality. But being strategic about protecting your joints from cold exposure can make a meaningful difference. Patricia started wearing lightweight, breathable long sleeves and pants to bed instead of shorts and a tank top. She added a light blanket over her feet and knees. She turned the air conditioning up just a few degrees, to around 68 or 69. The changes were subtle, but the results were significant. "I feel like my joints finally had a chance to stay comfortable all night," she said. "It seems so simple now, but I spent years punishing my body without realizing it." If you're finding this information valuable, please consider giving this video a like. It helps the algorithm share this content with more people who might benefit from it. Now let me share something that connects all of these factors together, and this might be the most important point of all. Stress and mental state before sleep directly impact your joints. I know this might sound like a stretch, but the research on this connection is compelling, and my clinical experience confirms it over and over again. Mr. William Foster, 73, a retired business owner from Boston, Massachusetts, came to me with what he described as unpredictable joint stiffness. "Some mornings I'm fine," he said, "and other mornings I can barely function. I can't figure out the pattern." When we began tracking William's symptoms alongside his daily habits, a clear pattern emerged. His worst mornings always followed evenings when he had been worrying about something. His business, even though he'd retired. His children's lives. World events. Financial concerns. On those nights, William would lie in bed with his mind racing, muscles tense, unable to fully relax. Here's the biological connection. When you're stressed, your body produces inflammatory compounds as part of the stress response. Cortisol levels remain elevated. Muscle tension increases and stays increased throughout the night. Blood flow patterns change. Your body never fully enters the deep restorative sleep phases where joint healing and repair occur most effectively. William's joints weren't just suffering from physical factors. They were suffering from the cumulative effects of chronic nighttime stress. The intervention that helped William most was establishing what I call a mental wind-down routine in the hour before sleep. This didn't mean meditation or anything complicated. For William, it meant consciously shifting his attention away from worry-inducing topics. He stopped watching the news after dinner. He started reading fiction instead of business books. He began writing down his concerns in a notebook, then physically closing the notebook and putting it in a drawer, symbolically setting those worries aside until morning. "I thought my joints were just wearing out," William told me later. "I didn't understand that my mind was wearing them out too." This brings me to a factor that many people find embarrassing to discuss, but it's absolutely crucial for joint health: your evening eating habits and their timing. Mrs. Eleanor Richardson, 67, a retired restaurant manager from New Orleans, Louisiana, had a lifelong habit of eating her largest meal of the day in the evening. "In my culture, dinner is the main event," she explained. "We eat late, we eat well, and we enjoy it." I would never suggest that Eleanor abandon her cultural traditions or stop enjoying her meals. But the timing and composition of those evening meals were contributing significantly to her morning joint stiffness. When you eat a large meal, particularly one high in certain foods that can promote inflammation, your digestive system requires significant resources. Blood flow is directed to your digestive tract. Inflammatory processes can be triggered depending on what you've eaten. Your body's nighttime repair processes may be compromised as energy is redirected to digestion. Eleanor wasn't willing to stop having dinner with her family, and I would never ask her to. But she made some strategic adjustments. She started eating her large meal earlier, around 6 o'clock instead of 8. She reduced her intake of foods that seemed to correlate with worse morning symptoms for her personally. She made sure to take a gentle walk after dinner rather than going straight to the couch. "I still eat well," Eleanor said with a smile at her follow-up appointment. "I just eat smarter, and I wake up feeling so much better." There's another aspect of evening habits that people rarely consider, and it has to do with the medications and supplements many of us take. Mr. James Mitchell, 74, a retired firefighter from Denver, Colorado, was taking several supplements for joint health: glucosamine, fish oil, turmeric, and a few others his friends had recommended. But he was taking all of them in the morning with his breakfast. "I figured it didn't matter when I took them," James said, "as long as I took them, right?" For some supplements, timing can matter quite a bit. Certain compounds are better absorbed with food, others without. Some have effects that peak within a few hours of taking them, while others build up in your system over time. James was essentially front-loading all of his joint support early in the day, then leaving his joints unsupported during the critical nighttime repair window. Now, I want to be very clear here. I'm not prescribing specific supplements or dosages. That's a conversation you need to have with your personal healthcare provider who knows your individual situation. But I am suggesting that you discuss with your provider whether the timing of your current supplements might be optimized for better nighttime joint support. After consulting with his healthcare team, James made some adjustments to when he took certain supplements. Some stayed in the morning, others moved to the evening. The change in his morning stiffness was noticeable within a few weeks. Let me tell you about one more patient whose story illustrates how all of these factors can come together. Mrs. Barbara Stewart, 78, a retired florist from Seattle, Washington, came to me feeling hopeless about her joint health. "I've tried everything," she said, tears in her eyes. "My mother had terrible joints. My grandmother had terrible joints. I figured it was just my destiny." Barbara had accepted that genetics had determined her fate. And yes, genetics do play a role in joint health. But they're far from the whole story. When we went through Barbara's evening routine in detail, we found that she was making almost every mistake we've discussed today. She stopped drinking water after lunch to avoid nighttime bathroom trips. She spent her evenings completely sedentary in her recliner. She slept in a tightly curled position with no support pillows. She kept her bedroom frigid because her husband preferred it cold. She watched anxiety-inducing news programs right up until she turned off the lights. She ate a large dinner late in the evening. And she took all her supplements first thing in the morning. Barbara wasn't destined for poor joint health. She had simply never been told that her nighttime habits mattered. Over the course of several months, Barbara gradually implemented changes to her evening routine. Not all at once, which would have been overwhelming, but one adjustment at a time. First, she addressed her hydration timing, then her movement before bed, then her sleep positioning. Each change built on the previous one. When I saw Barbara 6 months later, the transformation was remarkable. "I won't pretend I'm 20 again," she said, laughing, "but I can get out of bed in the morning without feeling like I'm being punished. I can play with my great-grandchildren. I can garden again. I had accepted that those parts of my life were over, and they're not." So let me share with you what I recommend discussing with your own healthcare provider about your nighttime routine. First, Evaluate your hydration timing. Are you inadvertently dehydrating your joints during the night? Consider strategic hydration in the hours before bed rather than completely cutting off fluids. Second, implement gentle movement before sleep. Not exercise, not stretching to the point of discomfort, just easy range of motion movements to prepare your joints for the night ahead. Third, assess your sleep position and support. Are you sleeping in a way that compresses or strains your joints? Could additional pillows or positional changes help? Fourth, consider your bedroom temperature and how you protect your joints from cold exposure during sleep. Fifth, examine your mental state before bed. Are you carrying stress and tension into your sleep time? What could you do to wind down mentally in the evening hours? Sixth, look at your evening eating habits. Timing, portion sizes, and food choices can all impact nighttime inflammation and joint health. And finally, talk to your healthcare provider about whether the timing of your medications or supplements might be optimized for better nighttime joint support. I want to leave you with this thought. Your joints don't stop needing care just because you're asleep. In many ways, the nighttime hours are when your joints need the most support, because this is when the healing and repair processes occur. What you do in the hour before sleep sets the stage for either a night of restoration or a night of continued stress on your joint structures. You have more control over your morning joint stiffness than you might have believed. The choices you make each evening ripple forward into the next day. Small, consistent changes to your nighttime routine can lead to meaningful improvements in how you feel when you open your eyes each morning. Please don't try to change everything at once. Pick one area to focus on this week. Master that, then add another. Sustainable change happens gradually, and your joints will thank you for every positive step you take. Before I wrap up, I want to share one more case that really drove home the importance of these nighttime habits for me as a physician. Mr. Richard Thompson, 76, a retired airline pilot from Atlanta, Georgia, had spent his career dealing with irregular sleep schedules, time zone changes, and the physical demands of sitting in a cockpit for hours at a time. When he retired, he thought his joint problems would improve with a regular schedule. Instead, they got worse. "I finally had the chance to sleep like a normal person," Richard told me during our first meeting. "But somehow, I felt worse than when I was flying across the Atlantic twice a week." What we discovered was that Richard had developed certain habits during his flying career that actually protected his joints, and he'd abandoned them in retirement. On layovers, he always did gentle stretches before bed because his body felt so cramped from the cockpit. He drank water strategically because he'd learned how dehydration affected his performance. He wore compression socks that kept his lower leg joints warm and supported. In retirement, Richard thought he didn't need those habits anymore. He thought they were work requirements, not health requirements. He was wrong. "I had accidentally created a joint protection routine without knowing it," Richard said after we reviewed his old habits. "Then I threw it all away because I thought it was just part of the job." Richard reinstated his old habits, adapted for his retired life. The gentle stretches before bed, the strategic hydration, the warmth for his joints during sleep. Within 2 months, he felt better than he had in years. This story matters because it shows that many of us already know what our bodies need. We just need to recognize it and be intentional about it. I also want to address something that many of my patients ask about, which is the relationship between joint stiffness and the quality of your mattress and bedding. Mrs. Catherine Murray, 69, a retired dental hygienist from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, had invested in an expensive mattress that was marketed for joint health, but she was still waking up stiff and sore. "I spent thousands of dollars on this bed," Catherine said, frustrated. "It was supposed to fix everything." The truth is, no mattress alone will solve joint stiffness if your pre-sleep habits are working against you. Catherine's mattress was fine, but she was still dehydrating herself before bed, still remaining completely sedentary all evening, still sleeping in a compressed position, and still going to bed stressed from watching disturbing television programs. Once Catherine addressed these habits, she found that her mattress worked much better for her. It wasn't the bed, she admitted. It was everything else. This isn't to say that your sleep surface doesn't matter. It does. But it's one piece of a larger puzzle, and focusing only on the mattress while ignoring the habits we've discussed today will likely lead to disappointment. There's also the question of pain medication timing that I should mention. Mr. George Anderson, 72, a retired postal worker from Minneapolis, Minnesota, was taking his joint pain medication first thing in the morning because that's when he felt the worst. By nighttime, the medication had worn off and he was sleeping without any support. After discussing this with his prescribing physician, George adjusted when he took his medication so that it would provide coverage during the night and into the morning hours. This is a conversation worth having with your own healthcare provider. When you take certain medications can matter as much as what you take. I've seen patients transform their mornings through these simple nighttime adjustments. Mrs. Helen Foster, 81, a retired seamstress from San Antonio, Texas, told me something that I'll never forget. She said, "Dr. Reynolds, I used to dread going to bed because I knew what the morning would bring. Now I look forward to sleep because I know I'm preparing my body for a better tomorrow." That's the shift I want for all of you. From dreading the night because of what morning brings, to embracing the night as an opportunity to set yourself up for success. And please, if you're experiencing significant joint symptoms, work with a qualified healthcare provider who can evaluate your individual situation. These general principles apply to most people, but your specific needs might require personalized attention. Thank you for spending this time with me today. If you found this information helpful, I'd be so grateful if you'd share this video with someone you love who might benefit from it. Subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you in the next video where we'll explore more ways to support your health and well-being. Take care of yourselves, and take care of those joints. They're the only ones you've got, and they deserve your attention not just during the day, but especially in those precious hours before sleep.